The rain came down in sheets, cold and unforgiving, as I stepped out of the hearse and into the courtyard of the old Presbyterian chapel in downtown Burlington. My black coat clung to my body, already soaked through within seconds. The Vermont autumn had never felt so bitter, so final. I stood there for a moment, raindrops mixing with the tears I'd promised myself I wouldn't shed. Not here. Not in front of them. My name is Marianne Collins, and I was burying my mother today. Through the stained glass windows, I could see shadows moving inside the chapel, hear the soft murmur of voices and occasional laughter. Yes, laughter, at my mother's funeral. The sound twisted something deep in my chest. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, and warmth spilled out along with the inappropriate cheer. The small chapel was filled with people I barely recognized, business associates, distant relatives, neighbors who'd rarely spoken to Mom when she was alive. And then I saw them, Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean, standing near the altar, wine glasses in hand, joking with some of the estate lawyer's assistants, toasting. My fists clenched involuntarily, nails digging into my palms. "Ah, Marianne, there you are." Uncle Walter called out, his voice carrying across the chapel. "We were wondering when you'd show up." I didn't answer. Instead, I scanned the room, suddenly realizing something was wrong. "Where's Jessie?" I asked, my voice cutting through the ambient chatter. Uncle Dean waved dismissively. "Around somewhere, probably in the bathroom." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I turned away from them and checked the bathroom. Empty. I searched the small side rooms. Nothing. With each passing second, my heartbeat accelerated. And then I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it beneath the patter of rain on the chapel roof. A muffled sob. I pushed back through the main doors, and there, huddled on the stone steps outside, sat my 14-year-old brother Jesse. His dress shirt was soaked completely through, his narrow shoulders shaking uncontrollably, lips almost purple with cold. No coat, no umbrella, no one had even noticed he was gone. My heart shattered. I rushed over, dropping to my knees in the mud, and pulled him into my arms. His skin was ice against mine. "Jesse, oh my God," I whispered, shrugging off my coat and wrapping it around him. "What are you doing out here?" He looked up at me with our mother's eyes, red-rimmed and devastated. "They said I didn't belong in there," he whispered through chattering teeth, "that it was for adults only, that I was making people uncomfortable by crying." White-hot rage surged through me. I helped Jesse to his feet, but his legs buckled beneath him. Without hesitation, I picked him up. This boy who was too tall now, for such things, but still too young to be so alone, and carried him back toward the chapel. I kicked the door open with my foot. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. The only sound in the room was Jesse's quiet sobbing against my shoulder. I stood there dripping rainwater onto the polished floor, holding my shivering brother, staring directly at my uncles. And that's when I said the 5 words that would split our family down the middle. This is what she feared. The silence that followed was absolute. Uncle Dean recovered first, setting down his wine glass with a too loud clink. "Marianne, you're making a scene," he hissed. "This is hardly appropriate." "Appropriate?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Was it appropriate to leave her? "Son, your nephew, outside in the rain while you toast with strangers? Was that in your funeral etiquette handbook?" Uncle Walter stepped forward, all false concern. Now, the boy was upset. "We just thought he needed some air." Jesse tightened his grip around my neck, his tears hot against my collar. "I'm taking him home," I said, turning toward the door. "You can finish your celebration without us." "Marianne," Uncle Dean called after me. "Don't be dramatic. You're not even his legal guardian." I stopped but didn't turn around. "Not yet," I replied, and pushed through the doors into the rain once more. That night, I tucked Jessie into bed in Mom's house, the house she'd fought so hard to keep, to pay off so her children would always have a home. He was still shivering, despite the hot shower and 3 blankets. "They're going to take me away from you, aren't they?" he whispered in the darkness. I sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his hair back from his forehead the way Mom used to do. "No," I promised, with more conviction than legal standing. "They won't." "But Mom didn't change her will," he said. "You told me she was going to, but then she got too sick." I swallowed. Hard. "I'll find a way, Jess." I promise. As Jesse finally drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Dean. We need to talk about arrangements. The house needs to be sold. Jesse needs a proper guardian. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the message, the pieces falling into place. They didn't want Jesse. They wanted the house, the last valuable thing our mother had managed to leave us. And they were willing to use a grieving 14-year-old boy as leverage to get it. 3 years of estrangement from my family had taught me many things, but nothing had prepared me for this. I switched off my phone and walked to the window, watching the rain continue to fall, as relentless as my determination. I won't let them win, Mom, I whispered to the, darkness. I won't let them take him. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the small yard where we'd once been happy, where Mom had taught Jesse to ride a bike, where we'd had summer barbecues before everything fell apart, before cancer took her from us, before the vultures began to circle. I didn't know how, but I would fight. For Jesse, for Mom, for the truth she'd tried to protect us from. Until the very end. The storm raged on, and somewhere in its fury, I found my resolve. I woke the next morning to the sound of voices downstairs. For a fleeting, beautiful moment, I thought it might be Mom, chatting with Jesse over breakfast as she had countless times before. Reality crashed back when I recognized Uncle Walter's booming laugh. I threw on a robe and rushed downstairs to find Jesse, sitting rigid at the kitchen table, a plate of untouched pancakes before him. My uncles occupied the other chairs, already dressed in suits, looking for all the world like they owned the place. "Morning, Marianne," Uncle Dean said smoothly. I made breakfast. Thought we could have a family meeting. I moved to stand behind Jesse, placing my hands protectively on his shoulders. "You should have, called first." "We did," Uncle Walter replied. "Several times. You turned your phone off." I felt Jesse trembling beneath my fingers. "What do you want?" I asked, cutting to the chase. Uncle Dean sighed, as if I were a difficult child, rather than a 32-year-old woman. "We need to discuss practical matters. The estate, Jesse's guardianship, the house." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, firmly. "Mom wanted Jesse to stay with me. She wanted the house to go to him." "Wishes aren't legally binding, Marianne," Uncle Walter interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. "Facts are. And the fact is, Elaine's last legal will, drawn up years ago, splits everything 3 ways between her siblings. That's me, Dean, and your mother." I felt the blood drain from my face. That will was made before Jesse was even born. "Nevertheless, it's the only valid document we have," Dean said, taking a sip of coffee from Mom's favorite mug. The sight made my stomach turn. "As for Jesse, well, the courts will have to decide who gets custody. And frankly, given your history, I don't think you're the most stable choice." Jesse's shoulders tensed beneath my hands. "My history?" I echoed. "You left Burlington 3 years ago." Walter counted off on his fingers. "You barely visited. You've had, 3 different jobs in that time? You live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Boston. You've been in therapy." He said the last word as if it were a criminal offense. "I was taking care of Mom when she got sick," I said through gritted teeth. "I moved back for her final months. I worked remotely to pay her medical bills. And yes, I went to therapy after a bad breakup, like millions of well-adjusted adults." Dean spread his hands. "We're not judging. We're just considering what's best for Jesse." "By leaving him in the rain?" I shot back. Walter's face darkened. "That was unfortunate, but the boy was making a scene." "The boy," I said, "was grieving his mother, at her funeral." Jesse abruptly pushed back from the table and ran upstairs. The sound of his door slamming echoed through the house. "See?" Dean sighed. "Emotional instability runs in your side of the family." It took every ounce of self-control not to throw the pancakes in his face. "Get out," I said quietly. "Marianne, get out. Now." They exchanged looks, then slowly rose from the table. "We're meeting with our lawyer this afternoon," Walter said, straightening his tie. "You should arrange for your own representation. For Jesse's sake, let's keep this civil." After they left, I sank into a chair, hands shaking. I knew what they were doing. They didn't care about Jesse. They never had. They saw him as a means to an end, a way to claim the house, sell it, and split the profits. My mind raced through options, none of them good. I needed to find Mom's updated will, the one she'd told me about, but that had somehow vanished during her rapid decline. I needed legal help I couldn't afford. I needed time. Upstairs, I found Jesse sitting on his bed, staring at a photo of Mom from before she got sick. Smiling, vibrant, her arms around both of us at Jesse's 12th birthday. "They're going to take me away, aren't they?" he asked, not looking up. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching. "No," I said firmly. "I won't let that happen." "But they said—" "I don't care what they said," I interrupted gently. "Mom wanted us to stay together. She told me." "Can you prove it?" I hesitated. "I'm going to try." That afternoon, while Jesse was napping, exhaustion from grief finally overtaking him, I began tearing through the house, searching drawers, cabinets, bookshelves. Mom had told me she'd updated her will, that she'd made arrangements for Jesse to stay with me, for the house to be his. But in the chaos of her final weeks, between hospital visits and hospice care, the document had vanished. I was elbow deep in a box of old papers when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Collins? This is Richard Harmon from Vermont Family Services. I'm calling regarding your brother, Jesse Collins." My blood ran cold. "Yes? We've received a petition for emergency temporary guardianship filed by Walter and Dean Miller. They've expressed concerns about the minor's current living situation." "What?" I gasped. "They can't do that." "I'm afraid they can, Ms. Collins. There will be a preliminary hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you bring any documentation supporting your own claim to guardianship." The call ended, and I sat frozen among the scattered papers, the reality of what I was facing finally sinking in. They weren't just threatening, they were acting. Fast. I needed help. Legal help. With trembling fingers, I called the only lawyer I knew, Sarah Chen, a college friend who practiced family law in Boston. "Marianne," she answered, "I heard about your mom. I'm so sorry." "Sarah," I said, my voice breaking, "I need help. They're trying to take Jesse." Sarah arrived the next morning at 7 a.m., looking every bit the powerhouse attorney in her charcoal suit, despite having driven 3 hours from Boston. She'd brought coffee, bagels, and a laser-focused determination that made me feel for the first time since Mom's death that we might have a fighting chance. "Walk me through everything," she said, spreading files across Mom's kitchen table. "Every conversation, every promise, every detail you remember about the updated will." I paced as I spoke, checking occasionally on Jesse, who was still asleep upstairs. It was about 2 months before she died. She was having a good day, one of her last. She told me she'd finalized her will with her lawyer, Mr. Peterson. She said the house would go to Jesse, to be held in trust until he was 21, and that I would be his guardian. Sarah made notes. "And you never saw this document?" "She said it was with Peterson. But when I called his office after she died, they said they had no record of an updated will. Just the old one from before Jesse was born." Sarah frowned. "That's unusual. Did she mention witnessing or notarizing?" "She said it was all legal, all set up." I ran my hands through my hair. "Sarah, I know she did this. She wouldn't have left Jesse vulnerable." "I believe you," Sarah said, her eyes kind but pragmatic. "But family court won't run on belief. We need something tangible." The preliminary hearing was a blur of legal terminology and thinly veiled accusations. Uncle Walter painted me as unstable and unreliable. Uncle Dean emphasized his financial security and family-oriented suburban lifestyle, conveniently omitting that he'd been divorced twice and barely knew Jesse. Their lawyer, an expensive-looking man named Harrison, presented a case for immediate temporary guardianship, citing concerns about the minor's emotional well-being in an unsettled environment. Sarah fought back brilliantly, highlighting my bond with Jesse, my presence during Mom's illness, and the suspicious timing of my uncle's sudden interest in guardianship. But without Mom's updated will, we were standing on shaky ground. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Holloway, seemed unmoved by either side. "I'm ordering a home study and psychological evaluation before making any temporary placements," she announced. "In the meantime, the minor will remain with Ms. Collins, provided she stays at the family residence. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks." Outside the courtroom, Uncle Walter caught my arm. "You're only delaying the inevitable, Marianne. We can make this easier. Split the house 3 ways, and we'll be reasonable about visitation." I yanked my arm away. "You just confirmed everything I suspected. This isn't about Jesse. It's about what Elaine would have wanted," he countered smoothly. "Don't you dare speak for her," I hissed, low enough that Jesse couldn't hear from where he stood with Sarah. "You barely visited when she was dying. You didn't even know what kind of pain medication she was on. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, but annoyance at being called out. 2 weeks, Marianne. Think about what's best for everyone. Back at the house, Sarah helped me formulate a plan. We would contact everyone who might have information. Mom's hospice nurses, her friends, her colleagues. Someone had to know something about the updated will. What if we can't? Find it? Jesse asked quietly from the doorway, startling us. He looked so young in his oversized sweatshirt, his face pale with worry. Sarah smiled gently. Then we build the strongest case possible without it. Judges consider the best interests of the child above everything else. After Sarah left, promising to return in a few days with more research, Jesse and I ordered pizza and watched old movies on the couch, Mom's favorite pastime when she was still well enough to join us. I could almost feel her presence in the room, in the well-worn cushions and the familiar creaks of the old house. Do you think we'll find it? Jesse asked as the credits rolled. The will? I hope so. Not just that, he said, staring at the blank TV screen. Mom, do you think we'll find pieces of her still? Here? I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, feeling the weight of his question. I think she left pieces of herself everywhere, Jess. In the book she read to us, in the garden she planted, in the way you laugh, just like her. He nodded, tears tracking silently down his face. Over the next week, I became a detective in my mother's life. I interviewed her hospice nurses, who remembered her, talking about updating her will but had no specifics. I spoke with neighbors who had visited during her final months. I even tracked down Mr. Peterson, her original lawyer, who confirmed she had called about making changes but never followed through with an appointment. Each dead end felt like another nail in our case's coffin. Meanwhile, social workers came and went, evaluating the house, interviewing Jesse and me separately, making notes that would determine our future. Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean launched a charm offensive, bringing gifts for Jesse, offering financial support, presenting themselves as the stable, reasonable options against my supposed emotional volatility. 12 days after the preliminary hearing, with just 2 days left before we faced Judge Holloway again, I was growing desperate. I sat in Mom's bedroom, now mine, surrounded by her books, her scarves, her life reduced to objects I couldn't bear to put away. Help me, I whispered to the empty room. I can't lose him too. I reached for her favorite novel on the nightstand, a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird she'd read at least once a year since college. As I lifted it, something slipped from between the pages and fluttered to the floor. A bookmark, I thought at first. But when I picked it up, I saw it was a receipt from the Burlington Public Library, dated 3 weeks before her death. The title listed was Estate Planning for Blended Families. My heart raced. Mom hadn't had a blended family in the traditional sense, but she'd often said Jesse and I were like 2 generations. Me, already an adult when he was still a child. I checked my watch. The library would be closing in an hour. Jesse, I called, grabbing my keys. We need to go, now. The library was quiet, nearly empty as closing time approached. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Finch, smiled in recognition as we approached the desk. Marianne Collins, she said warmly. I haven't seen you since your mother's service. Such a lovely woman, your mother. Thank you, I said, showing her the receipt. Mrs. Finch, did my mother return this book? It was due the week she went into hospice. Mrs. Finch checked her computer. It shows as returned by proxy, she said. Your uncle brought it back for her, along with a few others. My breath caught. Which uncle? Walter, I believe. Very considerate of him. Jesse shot me a confused look, but I was already moving toward the reference section where legal books were kept. It wasn't there. It would be in circulation, Mrs. Finch called after me. Let me check if it's been borrowed again. A few keystrokes later, she shook her head. It's marked as damaged and pulled from circulation. Water damage, apparently. Water damage? Or deliberately destroyed? Mrs. Finch? I said carefully. Is there any way to know what else was returned that day? Or if anything might have been inside the book when it was returned? She adjusted her glasses. We don't typically look inside returned books unless they're obviously damaged. But there was something unusual. Jesse and I leaned forward simultaneously. Your mother had called me personally about that book. She asked me to keep an eye out for something she'd left inside it. A letter, I think she said. But when your uncle returned it, I was on lunch break. My colleague processed the return. Hope and dread battled in my chest. Is there any way to see that book now, even if it's damaged? Mrs. Finch hesitated, then nodded. For Elaine's daughter? I think we can bend the rules a bit. The damaged book sat on the table between us, its pages warped and stained. Mrs. Finch had retrieved it from a storage room where books awaiting repair or disposal were kept. Water damage to the cover and first 50 pages, she explained, turning it carefully. Unusual pattern, though, almost as if someone deliberately poured liquid on specific sections. I examined the book with trembling hands. The table of contents and the chapters on will creation were the most heavily damaged, unreadable, in fact, but the later chapters on trusts and guardianship had escaped the worst of it. Can I look through it? I asked. Mrs. Finch nodded, glancing at the clock. We close in 20 minutes, dear. Page by page, I carefully turned through the book, looking for any sign of Mom's handwriting, any inserted papers, any clue at all. Nothing. Disappointment crashed over me. Another dead end. Maybe she changed her mind, Jesse whispered, his voice small. I couldn't answer. I couldn't lie to him again. Couldn't make promises I had no way of keeping. As Mrs. Finch began to gather her things, preparing to usher us out for closing, I flipped absently to the back cover, running my fingers along the library's protective plastic coating, and felt something. A slight bulge in the back end paper beneath the library pocket. I turned the book over, examining the binding more closely. The end paper had been carefully re-glued, not by the library, judging by the uneven adhesive. Do you have a letter opener? I asked Mrs. Finch, my pulse quickening. She frowned but produced one from her desk drawer. Marianne, I can't let you damage library property further. I think someone already did, I said, gently working the opener along the seam of the end paper. It separated easily, revealing a folded sheet of paper tucked inside the binding. My hands shook so badly that Jesse had to unfold it for me. It's Mom's handwriting, he whispered. The letter was dated just 3 weeks before her death. My dearest children, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and things haven't gone as I planned. I tried to update my will formally, but Walter and Dean have been watching me like hawks since they realized how valuable the house has become. So this is my final wish. In my own hand, Jesse stays with Marianne. She is to be his legal guardian until he turns 18. The house remains in trust for Jesse until he turns 21, with Marianne as trustee. Everything else I own is to be divided equally between my children, not my brothers. I, Elaine Margaret Collins, being of sound mind despite what my brothers might claim, declare this to be my final will and testament, superseding all others. With all my love, Mom. Beneath her signature were 2 more. Judith Finch, witness, and Robert Hayes. Witness. Mrs. Finch gasped softly. Behind us. I'd forgotten until this moment. She asked me to witness it, said it was just in case. The other signature is from the coffee shop owner across the street. I stared at her, hope blooming. You witnessed this? You remember doing it? She nodded firmly. Yes, we both did. She was perfectly lucid, insisted on it, in fact. Made us state aloud that we observed her signing of her own free will. Would this hold up? I asked, hardly daring to believe. Mrs. Finch adjusted her glasses. I'm no lawyer, dear, but holographic wills, handwritten ones, are legal in Vermont if properly witnessed. And this one certainly was. Jesse clutched my arm, his fingers digging in with excitement or fear or both. We need to call Sarah, I said, carefully folding the letter. And we need to make copies. Multiple copies. Mrs. Finch was already moving toward the copy machine. I'll make them official with the library stamp, and I'm more than willing to testify if needed. As we drove home, the precious letter and its copies secure in my bag, Jesse was quiet, processing. Uncle Walter returned the book, he finally said. He must have found the letter. And tried to destroy it. I finished, anger burning in my throat. Damaged the book deliberately so no one would look too closely at it. But he missed where she hid it. He underestimated her, I said, just like they always did. That night I called Sarah, sending her scanned copies of the letter immediately. Her response was cautiously optimistic. This is significant, Marianne. Holographic wills are valid in Vermont, with proper witnessing, which this appears to have. The fact that your uncles potentially attempted to conceal or destroy it actually strengthens our case. So we'll win? Sarah hesitated. We have a much stronger position now, but they'll fight. Be prepared. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat in Mom's rocking chair by the window, watching the moon travel across the sky, the letter clutched in my Hands. I found it, Mom, I whispered, just like you knew I would. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Jesse appeared in the doorway, blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Can't sleep? I asked. He shook his head and came to sit at my feet, leaning against the chair the way he used to lean against Mom. Do you think they knew? He asked. About the letter, I mean. Is that why they left me? Outside at the funeral? Because they were angry? The question broke my heart. No, Jess. They left you outside because they don't understand what matters. They never have. He nodded slowly, processing this truth about the men who were supposed to be his family. Tomorrow, I said, running my fingers through his hair, we start fighting back. For real. With Mom's letter. With Mom's letter, I agreed. Her final gift to us. Outside, the first light of dawn began to break over Burlington, illuminating the garden Mom had loved, the trees she'd planted when Jessie was born. In that gentle light, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before she got sick. Hope. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. Our hearing had been scheduled for 9 a.m., but by 8:30 the benches were all ready, filling with faces I recognized. Mom's colleagues from the diner where she'd worked nights, neighbors from our street, even Jessie's math teacher. Mrs. Finch sat primly in the front row, clutching her purse, looking both nervous and determined. Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean arrived with their lawyer at 8:45, looking confident until they saw the crowd. Their expressions darkened when they spotted Mrs. Finch. What's she doing here? I heard Dean mutter to Walter. Sarah placed a steadying hand on my arm. Remember, she whispered, no matter what they say, no outbursts. Let the evidence speak. Jessie sat between us, wearing the suit we'd bought for the funeral, looking both terrified and resolute. He hadn't spoken much that morning, but before we'd left the house, he'd stood in front of Mom's photo and whispered, "We're going to make it right." At precisely 9 a.m., Judge Holloway entered, and we all rose. She was a formidable woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses that she peered over more often than through. I understand there have been developments in this case, she said, looking directly at Sarah. Sarah stood. Yes, Your Honor. We've discovered new evidence regarding Elaine Collins's final wishes. A holographic will, properly witnessed, that explicitly names Marianne Collins as guardian for the minor child and trustee of the family home. Uncle Walter's lawyer was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, we've had no opportunity to examine this alleged document. You'll have your chance, Counselor, Judge Holloway replied coolly. Ms. Chen, please present your evidence. Sarah approached the bench with copies of Mom's letter, the original secured in a clear protective sleeve. She also presented affidavits from Mrs. Finch and Mr. Hayes, the coffee shop owner, confirming they had witnessed Mom's signature knowingly and willingly. Judge Holloway read through everything carefully, her expression revealing nothing. When she finished, she looked up at Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean. Gentlemen, would you care to explain why this document was concealed inside a library book that was returned, damaged after Ms. Collins's death? Uncle Walter shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, I have no knowledge of any concealed documents. I simply returned some books to the library as a courtesy. A courtesy, the judge repeated flatly. Mr. Miller, are you aware that deliberately concealing or destroying a will is a criminal offense in the state of Vermont? The color drained from Uncle Walter's face. His lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently in his ear. Your Honor, the lawyer said smoothly, my clients categorically deny any knowledge of this document prior to today. However, even if this letter is authentic, a holographic will has limitations. It cannot supersede a properly executed formal will, especially regarding real property. Sarah was ready. Your Honor, Vermont statute clearly states that a holographic will, when properly witnessed, carries the full legal weight of a formal will. Furthermore, the witnesses have provided sworn statements that Elaine Collins was of sound mind and acting under no duress when she created this document. For the next hour, the arguments flew back and forth. Uncle Dean's and Uncle Walter's lawyer questioned the authenticity of the letter, the reliability of the witnesses, and even Mom's mental capacity during her final weeks. Each attack felt like a knife, but I kept my face composed, my eyes forward. Beside me, Jesse grew increasingly tense, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Finally, Judge Holloway held up her hand, silencing both sides. I've heard enough procedural arguments. Now I want to hear from the people actually affected. She turned to Jesse. Young man, would you approach the bench? Jesse looked at me, panic in his eyes. I nodded encouragingly, and he stood on shaky legs, making his way to stand before the judge. Jesse Collins, Judge Holloway said, her voice gentler than before. You're 14 years old, correct? Yes, ma'am, he replied, barely audible. In this courtroom, you address me as Your Honor, she corrected, but with a small smile that took the sting out of the words. Yes, Your Honor. Jesse, I'd like you to tell me in your own words where you want to live and why. Jesse swallowed hard. I could see, his shoulders trembling slightly, but when he spoke, his voice was clear. I want to stay with Marianne, Your Honor. She's always been there. When Mom got sick, Marianne moved back home. She worked from the hospital when Mom needed her. She learned how to give injections and change medical equipment. His voice grew stronger. My uncles visited twice. Both times they talked about the house, how much the neighborhood had come up, what it might be worth. Uncle Dean shifted uncomfortably in his seat. At the funeral, Jesse continued, his voice catching, they told me I was making people uncomfortable by crying. They said I should wait outside until I could pull myself together. It was raining, but they didn't. He paused, steadying himself. They didn't care. Marianne found me. She always finds me. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. Thank you, Jesse. You may return to your seat. Next, she called me to the stand, asking about my relationship with Jesse, my plans for his care, my employment situation. I answered truthfully, about my freelance writing work, about my intention to stay in Burlington, about the savings Mom had left that would help support us until I found a full-time position locally. And the house? She asked. Your uncle's attorney argues that the property should be sold and the proceeds divided. My mother paid off that mortgage by working double shifts for 15 years, I said firmly. She wanted Jesse to have the stability of staying in his home, his school, his community, especially after losing her. Finally, Judge Holloway called. Uncle Walter forward. Her questions were pointed, almost prosecutorial. Mr. Miller, can you explain your sudden interest in your nephew's welfare? According to multiple witness statements, you visited your sister only twice during her illness. Uncle Walter cleared his throat. Family relationships are complicated, Your Honor. Elaine and I had our differences, but blood is blood. Indeed, the judge said dryly. And the damaged library book containing your sister's final wishes? Pure coincidence, I suppose. I returned several books for her. I didn't inspect them. How convenient. Judge Holloway removed her glasses, fixing Uncle Walter with a hard stare. Mr. Miller, in my 27 years on the bench, I've developed a rather keen sense for when someone is attempting to manipulate. The court. This sense is sending up red flags all over this case. Uncle Walter's lawyer rose to object, but Judge Holloway waved him down. Save it, counselor. I've heard enough. She turned to address the entire courtroom. I'll be taking a 30-minute recess to consider my ruling. Court is adjourned until 11:15. The next half hour was the longest of my life. Jesse and I sat in the hallway, neither of us speaking, both too afraid to hope. Sarah paced nearby, reviewing notes, occasionally offering reassuring smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean huddled with their lawyer at the far end of the corridor, their expressions grim. At exactly 11:15, we filed back into the courtroom. Judge Holloway entered, her face solemn. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, she began, I find the holographic will of Elaine Collins to be valid and legally binding. The document clearly expresses her wishes regarding both guardianship of the minor child and disposition of her property. I felt Jesse's hand slip into mine, squeezing so tight it almost hurt. Therefore, I am granting full legal guardianship of Jesse Collins to his sister, Marianne Collins, effective immediately. Furthermore, the family home at 247 Maple Street shall be placed in trust for Jesse Collins until his 21st birthday, with Marianne Collins serving as trustee. Uncle Walter half rose from his seat, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Judge Holloway wasn't finished. Additionally, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into the potential concealment or destruction of a legal will. Mr. Walter Miller and Mr. Dean Miller may face criminal charges pending that investigation. She struck her gavel once, the sound echoing like a thunderclap through the silent courtroom. This ruling is final. Court is adjourned. The days following the court ruling passed in a blur of paperwork, legal formalities, and cautious celebration. Sarah stayed an extra day to help us navigate the guardianship documents and trust setup, then returned to Boston with promises to check in regularly. Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean disappeared from our lives as suddenly as they had reappeared, their threats of appeal falling silent after the district attorney's office contacted them for interviews. The investigation was ongoing, but Sarah assured us that the criminal implications would likely keep them at bay permanently. Besides, she'd said before leaving, they've been thoroughly humiliated in public. Men like that care about their reputations more than anything. She was right. Within a week, we heard through neighborhood gossip that Uncle Dean had canceled his country club membership and Uncle Walter was taking a sabbatical from his investment firm. Their attempts to seize Mom's legacy had backfired spectacularly, but the victory felt hollow against the persistent ache of Mom's absence. The house seemed both too empty and too full, empty of her physical presence but overflowing with memories that ambushed us in unexpected moments. One morning, 2 weeks after the hearing, I found Jessie sitting at the kitchen table, staring at Mom's chipped blue coffee mug. She always said she'd replace it, he said without looking up, but she never did. She loved that ugly thing, I replied, running my finger along the rim. Said it had character. Jessie nodded, then pushed it gently toward me. You should use it. I couldn't. She'd want you to, he insisted. It's just gathering dust otherwise. So, I did. That small act, drinking coffee from Mom's favorite mug, became the first step in reclaiming our home as a place of life, not just memorials. Other changes followed. I converted Mom's home office into a workspace for my freelance writing. Jessie rearranged his room, painted one wall deep blue, something Mom had always vetoed but that I approved with only minor hesitation. We planted new flowers, in her garden, ones that would bloom the following spring. Slowly, painfully, we began to build a new normal. The financial reality, however, remained challenging. Mom's medical bills had depleted most of her savings, and while my freelance work paid the utilities and groceries, it wouldn't cover larger expenses indefinitely. I needed something more stable, something local. You could teach? Jessie suggested one evening as we folded laundry together, another new routine we'd established. Mom always said you were the smartest person she knew. I laughed. That's what moms are supposed to say. No, she meant it. She kept all your college papers in that box in the attic, the ones with the A+. I paused, a pillowcase half folded in my hands. She kept those? Jessie nodded. She showed them to me sometimes. Said you could have been anything, professor, writer, lawyer, but you chose to help people instead. My throat tightened. My helping people had meant moving to Boston after college, working for a nonprofit that assisted low-income families navigate social services. It had been meaningful work, but paid barely enough to cover my tiny apartment and student loans. When Mom got sick, I'd left it without hesitation, cobbling together freelance gigs that allowed me to be with her. Maybe I could teach, I said thoughtfully. I'd need to get certified, though. The next day, I contacted Burlington Community College about their education certification program. To my surprise, they not only had an accelerated track for people with existing degrees, but were specifically looking for writing instructors for their adult education program. We need someone to start next month, the department chair told me over the phone. Just basic composition and business writing for now, but there could be more classes in the spring semester. The timing felt almost supernatural, as if Mom had orchestrated it from wherever she was now. I was filling out the application that evening when the doorbell rang. Jessie got there before me, pulling the door open without checking first, a habit I'd been trying to break. Jessie, you have to ask who it, I began, walking into the hallway. But the words died in my throat when I saw who stood on our porch. Mark Sullivan, my ex-boyfriend from Boston, the relationship that had sent me to therapy after it imploded spectacularly 2 years ago. Marianne, he said with that smile that had once made my heart race. I heard about your mom. I'm so sorry. Jessie looked between us, confused. I'd never told him much about Mark, just that there had been someone in Boston and it hadn't worked out. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I wanted to check on you, he said, as if showing up unannounced after 2 years of silence was perfectly reasonable. Make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I replied automatically. We're fine. Mark glanced at Jessie, then back to me, his expression softening into one I recognized all too well. The sympathetic, slightly condescending look he'd perfected during our relationship. You're raising a teenager now? Mari, that's a lot to take on alone. Something in his tone set off warning bells. We're managing, I said firmly. Thank you for your concern, but it's really not necessary. He reached out, touching my arm. I'm staying at the Hilton downtown. Why don't we get dinner tonight? Talk about old times. Catch up properly. Before I could answer, Jesse stepped forward. She's busy tonight, he said, his voice deeper than usual, almost protective. We both are. Mark looked taken aback, then laughed awkwardly. Rain check then? I'm in town until Sunday. I nodded non-committally, already closing the door. Safe travels, Mark. When the door shut, Jesse turned to me with raised eyebrows. That's the guy who made you go to therapy? I winced. You knew about that? Mom told me a little. Said some jerk broke your heart, but that you were handling it in a healthy way. He shrugged. She said therapy wasn't something to be ashamed of, that it showed strength. I smiled, blinking back sudden tears. She was right about that. He seems like a tool, Jesse said matter-of-factly. A startled laugh escaped me. He kind of is. So why did he really come, after all this time? I sighed, leaning against the wall. I don't know. Maybe he genuinely wanted to offer condolences. Jesse crossed his arms, looking remarkably like Mom in his skepticism. Or maybe he heard you inherited a house. The thought had occurred to me too, though I'd tried to dismiss it as cynicism. Mark had always been careful with money, to the point of stinginess with everything except his own hobbies. One of our biggest fights had been about his suggestion that I was financially irresponsible for helping Mom with bills instead of building my own savings. Either way, I said, it doesn't matter. That chapter of my life is closed. Jesse nodded, satisfied, and headed back to his homework. But Mark's unexpected appearance had unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. It was a reminder that the past never stayed neatly contained where you left it. That night, I lay awake long after Jesse had gone to bed, replaying the day's events. The teaching opportunity felt right, a way to honor Mom's belief in my abilities while providing stability for Jesse. But Mark's reappearance had stirred up old insecurities, old doubts. The following morning, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Alarmed, I threw on a robe and rushed down to find Jesse at the kitchen table, with Mrs. Finch, both huddled over steaming mugs of tea. Good morning, Mrs. Finch said cheerfully. Hope you don't mind the early visit. Jesse was waiting at the library door when I opened. I glanced at Jesse, who looked both sheepish and determined. I needed to ask Mrs. Finch something, he explained. About Mom. I should have called first, Mrs. Finch admitted. But when he explained, it seemed important. I poured myself coffee in Mom's blue mug. What's this about? Jesse exchanged a look with Mrs. Finch, who nodded encouragingly. I asked if Mom ever talked about us, about the future, about Mark. The name hit me like a slap. Mark? Why would Mom talk about him? Mrs. Finch set down her mug carefully. Elaine came to the library often during her illness, said it was the one place that still felt normal. We talked while she browsed. She mentioned your ex-boyfriend several times, especially toward the end. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What did she say? She was concerned, Mrs. Finch said gently. She said he'd contacted her a few months before she got really sick. Asked about the house, whether she had plans to sell it. He what? My hands tightened around the mug. She thought it was odd, especially since you two had been broken up for some time. When she told him she'd never sell, that it was for her children, he started suggesting you might want to sell your share after she was gone. For a fresh start, he said. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Mark's sudden reappearance wasn't about condolences. It was about the house. The same house my uncles had tried to claim. Mom never told me, I said, stunned. She didn't want to upset you, Mrs. Finch explained. She said you'd been through enough with that young man. Jesse leaned forward. That's why I went to see Mrs. Finch. When that guy showed up yesterday, something felt off. I remembered Mom saying once that your ex-boyfriend was too interested in our assets. I thought Mrs. Finch might know more. I looked at my 14-year-old brother with new eyes. He'd always been perceptive, but this level of awareness surprised me. There's more, Mrs. Finch added. Elaine was worried he might try to reconnect with you after she was gone. She called him, her words, a vulture with good hair. Despite everything, I laughed. It sounded exactly like Mom. After Mrs. Finch left, promising to call if she remembered anything else, Jesse and I sat at the kitchen table, processing. So Mark's just like Uncle Walter and Uncle Dean, Jesse said flatly. After the house. Looks that way, I agreed, feeling strangely detached. The hurt I might have expected was absent, replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of exactly who Mark Sullivan was. and always had. Been. Are you okay? Jessie asked, studying my face. I considered the question seriously. You know what? I really am. It's actually liberating. Liberating? To see him clearly. No more doubts, no more wondering if I was too hard on him or if things could have been different. I reached across the table and squeezed Jessie's hand. Thank you for looking out for me. He shrugged, embarrassed, but pleased. That's what family does. That afternoon, Mark called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. A carefully casual invitation to dinner that evening. I texted back a simple response. I know you talked to Mom about the house. Please don't contact me again. His reply came almost instantly. That's ridiculous. Your mother must have misunderstood. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I blocked his number and turned my attention to the teaching application, completing it with a newfound clarity and purpose. 2 days later, I received a call from the college. They wanted me to come in for an interview the following week. The department chair mentioned they'd already spoken to some of my references, including, to my surprise, Mrs. Finch. She's not on my reference list, I said, confused. No, but she called us specifically to recommend you, the chair explained. Said you were exactly the kind of instructor we need, someone who understands the value of education and perseverance. The interview went well, so well that they offered me the position on the spot. 2 courses for the fall semester with the possibility of more in the spring. The salary wasn't extravagant, but combined with my freelance work, it would be enough to support Jessie and me comfortably. Life began settling into new rhythms. I prepared for my classes, Jessie started high school, and together we continued the slow process of healing. We established Friday night movies, Sunday morning pancakes, and a rotating schedule for household chores that we mostly adhered to. There were still hard days. Jessie's first band concert without Mom in the audience, the parent-teacher conferences I attended alone, the holidays looming on the horizon. But there were good days too, increasingly so. One evening in late October, as the Vermont autumn painted our neighborhood in fiery reds and golds, Jessie found me on the porch swing, grading papers. I've been thinking, he said, sitting beside me. Dangerous pastime, I teased, setting aside my work. He rolled his eyes, but smiled. I want to invite some friends over this weekend. For a Halloween thing. Nothing crazy, just movies and pizza. It was the first time since Mom's death that he'd shown interest in socializing. Of course, I said, trying to contain my enthusiasm. That sounds great. Cool. He hesitated. Also, I was wondering if we could maybe redecorate a little. The living room still feels like Mom's, I finished for him. He nodded, looking guilty. I don't mean get rid of her stuff, just maybe move things around, make it feel more like ours. The question touched something deep inside me, a recognition that we were both ready to take another step forward. I think that's a perfect idea, I said. We could start tomorrow if you want. Jessie's face lit up. Really? I have some ideas. The sound of a car pulling into our driveway interrupted him. We both looked up to see an unfamiliar sedan parking behind my Civic. Are you expecting someone? Jessie asked. I shook my head, setting down my papers and standing up. A woman emerged from the car, mid-40s, professionally dressed, carrying a leather portfolio. Something about her bearing immediately put me on alert. Miss Collins? She called, approaching the porch. Marianne Collins? Yes, I replied cautiously. Can I help you? She extended her hand. Diane Mercer, from the district attorney's office. I'm handling the case involving your uncles. Do you have a moment to talk? Jessie and I exchanged glances. Of course, I said, leading her inside. In the living room, the one Jessie wanted to redecorate, Ms. Mercer got straight to the point. We've completed our investigation into the concealment of your mother's will, she said, opening her portfolio. There's sufficient evidence to bring charges against both Walter and Dean Miller. My stomach tightened. What kind of charges? Tampering with evidence, attempted fraud, potential elder abuse related to pressuring your mother during her illness. She looked up at me with serious eyes. These are significant charges, Ms. Collins. They could face jail time. The word hung in the air between us. Jail time. My uncles, Mom's brothers, in prison. However, Ms. Mercer continued, before we proceed with formal charges, the DA wanted me to discuss another option with you. What option? Jessie asked from beside me. Ms. Mercer addressed him directly, respecting his place in the conversation. A settlement agreement. Your uncles would formally renounce any claim to your mother's estate, pay restitution covering legal fees and court costs, and submit written apologies acknowledging their actions. And in exchange? I asked, already knowing the answer. We would not pursue criminal charges. I sat back, processing this information. Part of me, a dark, wounded part, wanted to see Walter and Dean face the full consequences of their actions. They had tried to steal Jesse's home, had left him crying in the rain, had attempted to erase Mom's final wishes. But another part of me heard Mom's voice, gentle but firm. Don't let bitterness take root, Mari. It'll strangle everything good. What do you think? I asked Jesse, recognizing that this decision affected him just as much as me. He considered the question with a seriousness beyond his years. Would they have to stay away from us, as part of the agreement? Ms. Mercer nodded. We could include a no-contact provision, yes. Jesse looked at me. I don't need to see them punished. I just need them to leave us. Alone. The simplicity of his answer brought tears to my eyes. Even after everything, he wasn't seeking revenge, just peace. I agree, I said softly, then turned to Ms. Mercer. We'll accept the settlement, with the no-contact provision. As Ms. Mercer outlined the next steps, I felt a weight lifting, one I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were choosing our path forward. Winter came to Vermont with its usual decisiveness, a sudden snowfall in mid-November that transformed Burlington overnight. I awoke to Jesse's excited voice calling me to the window, where the world had turned pristine white. Snow day, he announced triumphantly, showing me the notification on his phone. Lucky you, I said, already calculating how I'd manage my afternoon class. With the roads in this condition. Lucky us, he corrected. The college is closed too. And so we found ourselves with an unexpected gift, a day suspended from ordinary time. We spent the morning finishing the living room redesign we'd been working on gradually over the past few weeks. The furniture had been rearranged, walls repainted a warm sage green that somehow made the room feel both newer and more comfortable. Mom's favorite reading chair remained in the corner, but now it sat beside a modern floor lamp Jesse had chosen. It was different, but right. A blend of past and present that honored where we'd come from while creating space for where we were going. After lunch, we bundled up and ventured outside. The neighborhood was quiet, muffled by snow with only a few intrepid souls, shoveling driveways or building snowmen. We walked to the small park 2 blocks away, leaving parallel trails of footprints in the untouched snow. We should get a dog, Jessie said suddenly, watching a neighbor's golden retriever bound joyfully through a snowdrift. A dog? I repeated, surprised. Mom had been allergic, so pets had never been an option. Yeah, something big and goofy. It would be good to have another heartbeat in the house. He glanced at me sideways. Unless you're allergic too? No, I'm not allergic. The idea took root immediately. A dog. Another presence in our too-quiet house. Maybe we could check the shelter after the road's clear. Jessie's smile was worth every complication a pet would bring. As we rounded the corner toward home, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. Hey, stranger, I answered. How's Boston? Cold, crowded, and completely normal, she replied. How's the settlement process going? Almost done. Walter and Dean signed everything last week. Their apology letters arrived yesterday. And? Were they actually apologetic? I laughed. About as much as you'd expect. Lots of regret for any misunderstanding and never intended to cause distress. Classic non-apology apologies, Sarah scoffed. Did you burn them? No, I said, watching Jessie run ahead to clear our walkway. I read them once, then put them away. They don't matter anymore. And it was true. Somewhere in the past few months, the anger and hurt had lost their sharp edges. My uncles had shown who they truly were, and in doing so, had freed me from any obligation to them, even the obligation of resentment. Well, I have news, Sarah said, her voice brightening. I'm considering a job offer in Burlington. What? Since when are you looking to leave your fancy Boston firm? Since I realized how much I miss Vermont winters, she said dryly. Actually, there's a family law practice here looking for a partner. The work would be more meaningful, the pace less crushing. That's amazing, Sarah. You'd be incredible at it. Plus, she added, her voice softening, I've missed having my best friend nearby. The words warmed me through my winter coat. In the chaos of Mom's illness and death, I'd lost touch with so many people. The thought of rebuilding that friendship felt like another piece falling into place. We talked a while longer. About her. Job prospects, my teaching position, Jesse's adjustment to high school. When we hung up, I stood for a moment in the snow-covered yard, taking in the quiet beauty of our neighborhood, the solid presence of our home. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined feeling this sense of peace, of possibility. Inside, I found Jesse in the kitchen, attempting to make hot chocolate. He'd spilled cocoa powder across the counter and was frantically trying to wipe it up before I noticed. "Need some help?" I offered, hiding my smile. He looked up, relief washing over his face. "Yes, please. I wanted to surprise you, but it's the thought that counts," I assured him, grabbing another towel. Together, we cleaned up the mess and started fresh, working side by side at the counter Mom had stood at. Thousands of times. As we sipped our hot chocolate, Jesse pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right time to give you this," he said, suddenly serious. "I found it in Mom's jewelry box when we were reorganizing." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written on the front in Mom's handwriting. "Have you read it?" I asked. Jesse shook his head. "It's addressed to you." I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of paper. The letter was dated just 1 week before Mom died. "My dearest Marianne, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. There's so much I want to say, but words feel insufficient now. So I'll say the most important things. You have always been my greatest pride. From the moment you were born, so serious, so determined, I knew you would forge your own path with integrity and compassion. You haven't disappointed me once. I know the burden I've placed on you is heavy. Raising Jesse, protecting our home, building your own life simultaneously, it's more than I would ask if I had any choice. But I've seen your strength, Mari. You are capable of more than you know. Remember to take care of yourself. Not just... Jesse, find joy again. Open your heart when the time is right. You deserve love and light and laughter. Most importantly, know that I am at peace because you two have each other. In the end, that's all that matters. The love between you, the family you make together, and with others who earn their place in your hearts. All my love, always. Mom." Tears spilled down my cheeks unchecked. Jesse moved to sit beside me, resting his head against my shoulder as I read the letter aloud to him. When I finished, we sat in silence for a long moment, both lost in our own thoughts. "She was right," Jesse finally said, "about us having each other." I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. "I was so scared," he continued, his voice small. "After she died, I thought I'd be alone. Or worse, with Uncle Walter or Uncle Dean." "Me too," I admitted. "I was terrified of failing you, of failing her." Jesse looked up at me, his eyes, so like Mom's, clear and direct. "You haven't, not even close." In that moment, sitting in our kitchen with snow falling outside and Mom's words between us, I felt something settle into place. A certainty that we would be okay. Different, changed, still grieving, but fundamentally okay. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be college applications and dating dramas, financial struggles and career decisions, ordinary life with all its complexities and challenges. But we would face it together, with Mom's love as our foundation. That evening, we built a fire in the living room fireplace and sat before it on the new rug Jesse had chosen, deep blue-like, the wall in his bedroom. I brought out Mom's photo albums, and we flipped through them slowly, sharing memories, laughing at forgotten moments, occasionally wiping away tears. In one photo, Mom stood between us on Jesse's 12th birthday, her arms around our shoulders, her smile radiant despite the illness already beginning inside her. She looked directly into the camera with those clear eyes that had always seen straight to the truth of things. "She knew we'd be okay," I said softly. "Even then," Jesse nodded. "Because we had her, and because we have each other." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering our small corner of Vermont in pristine white, erasing tracks, softening edges. Inside, the fire crackled, casting warm light across our redesigned living room, not quite the same as before, but still unmistakably home. I thought about all we had faced since that rainy day at the funeral, the legal battles, the revelations, the grief and growth, and I understood now what Mom had meant in her letter about the family we make. It wasn't just Jesse and me, but all the people who had stood with us. Sarah with her legal brilliance, Mrs. Finch with her quiet integrity, even my students who showed me daily that I still had something valuable to give. The truth Mom had tried to protect us from, The greed and selfishness that could tear apart even blood relations had indeed been painful to face. But in confronting it, we had found a deeper truth. That family is defined not by DNA but by love, by choice, by showing up when it matters most. "What are you thinking about?" Jesse asked, closing the photo album. I smiled at him, this remarkable boy becoming a man before my eyes. "I'm thinking Mom would be proud of us." "She would," he agreed, then added with sudden certainty, "She is." And in the quiet of our home, sheltered from the winter storm, I believed he was right. The road ahead was uncharted, but we would navigate it together, carrying Mom's love with us, letting go of bitterness, embracing the truth that had set us free. That real family walks out into the storm just to keep you warm.